Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to this very special edition of Atlanta Business Radio. It is time for MarketMate Atlanta. Stone Payton, Corey, Rick here with you. Corey, this is going to be a fantastic segment. Who do we bring with us this morning?
Well, today, Stone, we have another great show. And on MarketMate Atlanta this morning, we have another great guest, Mr. Don Bravaldo of Bravaldo Capital Advisors. Bravaldo Capital Advisors is a boutique Atlanta-based mergers and acquisitions and corporate finance advisory firm, and it provides independent economic and financial advice and execution services for lower middle market companies with revenues typically between $10 million and $300 million that are located primarily in the Southeast United States. They offer a full range of transaction and advisory services, guiding their clients through sell-side transactions, exit strategy planning, growth through acquisition, debt restructuring, and corporate recapitalization. Don's team has extensive expertise in a wide range of industries, including industrials, information technology, healthcare, and general business services. Over the years, Don has been a tremendous resource to the folks I've referred him to, and he's also been a loyal partner and friend for many years as well. Don, welcome.
Thank you, Corey. Glad to be here. Thanks, Stone. Good morning.
Well, that was pretty thorough. Do we really need to do a show now? That was pretty.
That was easy.
Well, what are we going to do for the next 58 minutes?
Exactly. All right, let's ask him some questions.
Well, Don, why don't you introduce yourself to the listenership here, and hopefully we gave you an overview of your company, but just introduce yourself a little bit further.
Sure, I appreciate that, Corey. Well, I'm Don Bravaldo. I'm president of Bravaldo Capital Advisors. In terms of my background, I describe myself as a reformed CPA and a slow learner, I would add, because it took me about 7 years to figure out that I hated being chained behind a desk. But during that 7 years, I spent time with some really notable accounting firms, Arthur Andersen being one, another regional firm here locally in Atlanta called Bennett Thrasher. And it was there
great firm
that I had. Thank you. Yeah. And, they've done some amazing job growing since I departed. I don't know what that says about my stay there, but in any event, I learned a ton, about assessing financial risk and doing audit work, putting financial statements together, which has really, allowed me to have a different perspective on boutique investment banking and M&A transactions. I think the world for getting a start downtown with Anderson so many years ago, and finishing my accounting career with Bennett Thrasher. But along the way, on the personal side, I would tell you that I've been an Atlanta resident since 1993. I'm a Georgia native. The best thing that ever happened to me, I give a ton of credit to the folks at Bennett Thrasher, where I met my wife. We're celebrating 18 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been a wild ride, building a great firm where we get the pleasure every day of helping entrepreneurs achieve their lifelong goal of building a great business and putting an exclamation point on the end of building a great business by helping them exit that business.
You know, you mentioned that you had some experience as a CPA and you hit a point where you decided that just really wasn't a path you wanted to continue on. Was there a jumping off point, or was there a chain of events, or walk us through that?
Yeah, when I reflect back on that time, at Anderson, I had an opportunity to serve some of the biggest blue chip public companies around the Southeast. And while it was a great training ground where I was certainly around some of the best and brightest minds in the accounting and financial world, I had the issue of being a very small cog in a huge machine. It was difficult to see the big picture or to see that my work was ultimately making a difference to those clients. I grew up in a small town in Southwest Georgia with a pretty entrepreneurial family. I knew the value of what it meant to do hard work, and I loved to see the results of my work. And so I did get to find that at Bennett Thrasher, because in that transition, I found that BT ended up working with a little bit smaller size clients, closely held family-run businesses. And it was there that I felt that we were making a difference in those entrepreneurs' lives, whether it was helping them save on taxes, if it was helping them, get audited financial statements that got them that critical bank loan to grow their business. But the longer that you stay in accounting, there's really two paths. There's the technical partner that is so brilliant that you need him around to accomplish, the myriad of tax regulations or the audit requirements, or you're a partner, you get on the track to developing business. For me, at that point in time, they were never going to call me the technical partner they could not afford to lose. I'm a people person, and I really wanted to get into a sales role. So that was that critical juncture.
I think that when I think of your name, when I hear your name, business development is like the second thing that I hear when they talk about Don Bravaldo. And it seems to me that having a CPA would be very, very useful in the line of work that you're in now.
I couldn't agree more. In terms of the clients we work with, number one, a tremendous referral source are CPAs.
Of course.
Right? That have helped their clients along the way build a great business, and their clients have come to them and said, look, I have a desire to exit, to potentially transition or sell my business. Can you help me with that? And, in our referral network, we've just got some great partners that say, sure, we'd like to introduce you to Bravaldo Capital Advisors. That's what they specialize in. But it is more than that. Our partners are very adept at helping their clients get prepared to sell their business. And so a CPA fundamentally can advise that business owner 2 to 3 years in advance of a sale to say, we've been good about keeping the cost down. You've saved on taxes. You probably need to start to invest in a higher level of outside reporting so that a buyer has greater assurance that what they're buying is fundamentally a sound business. And so, during that process, audited financial statements, taking a privately held business that's been managed to minimize taxes and making that more like a public company that wants to show profitability is key. And so having a CPA that has that capability of really looking beyond the numbers and giving that kind of advice and helping their clients through preparing for a sale, those are the types of CPAs that we enjoy working with.
It seems like when somebody has an inclination to sell their business, it seems like there is a process that involves setup, that involves maybe cleaning some things up. Tell us how you coach people around that.
Very carefully. As you know, with most entrepreneurs, it's bite-sized sound bites that you get when you first meet them. But it all starts with getting the lay of the land. What state is the business in? Traditionally, with referrals, there's a trust factor there. Obviously, everything we do is confidential, so we sign non-disclosure agreements. But we'll look at the company's financial performance over the last 5 years, and we'll put together an analysis and come back to them and say, what are your plans for exit? What's important to you? What are you really trying to achieve? And it is no surprise that one of the first things that's critical is how much money can I get, right? What is my business worth?
You mean people want to know about money before they sell their business? Really?
They might just want to know about money. And on top of that, you throw in the factor that in many cases, what they think the business is worth is potentially a lot less than what it really is. And so we spend time, looking at business value, looking at how they've been running the business, and asking them, how much of a runway do we have to work with? Are you going to be one of those clients that will actually invest time in planning? Or are you going to be one of our clients, one of our many clients that come to us after events have transpired and say, it's time to sell?
Yeah.
I've done relatively little planning, but I've got a good business, and we would agree they have a good business. Do what you can, get it sold. On the planning side of the equation, our favorite types, because we know that planning makes a tremendous difference in our efforts and translates back into value. So back to your original question, what are some of the things that we look at and recommend? Again, oftentimes a private owner is going to manage from a tax perspective. There could be a lot of personal expenses or family members on the payroll, or you name it. We see everything from planes, trains, trips.
I'll bet you do.
Everything. We start to say, look, you're going to have to stop running that through the business. Yes, you're going to have to pay more in taxes today over the next few years, but it'll come back to you in a multiple of value 3 years from now when you sell. Yeah. That's the number one thing. And the second key critical thing is a lot of private businesses don't have audited financial statements. They might even have reviewed financial statements. This goes back to having outside assurance for investors that the company's financial records are sound. It takes time to start that level of service. And so getting the CPA involved or bringing in a CPA firm that can even provide those services over and around maybe the traditional tax preparer, those are some of the key things that we look at on the front end. We could talk for an hour about all of the advice that comes out of our analysis. I'll mention one key area that, given enough time for the planners out there, probably one of the single biggest things that we see is an owner that has a great business, is making a ton of money, but is still running around with their hair on fire trying to do everything themselves. So augmenting that management team, even if it's 2 to 3 years out, is a key piece.
Do you have an ideal timeline of, you mentioned the runway, where your client prepares and does the things that you advise them to do to get it ready? Is it 2 years, 3 years? I mean, it seems like the more time you have, the more you can really button this up and perhaps get a better value for that. Is that fair or is that off?
I think it's absolutely fair. And to be honest with you, Corey, both you and I have participated in peer-to-peer CEO organizations, and there's one that we both have participated in, Vistage. They're very fond of saying at the beginning, think of the end, right? So when you start a business, start it with what your end game is in mind. Now that end game can change.
Sure.
Right? It can start out being a family succession and end up being an M&A sale to the outside world. So for us, we have prospects that, no lie, we've had a relationship over, 15 years with the company. It seems like every couple of years they'll come in and say, we might want to sell this year. Can you analyze the business for us? Tell us where the value is today. And even if the value is there, that owner founder especially has difficulty letting go. And, I remember a story from a few years ago. There was a business that I had a 10-year relationship with, and no lie, we prepared a proposal 10 years of those 10 years. Every year they'd come in and say, now is time. And they just couldn't pull the trigger. We finally caught that car a few years ago I remember bringing in a bottle of champagne going, the longest pursuit at our firm. We finally landed them as a client. And, of course, that was the kiss of death because they ultimately did not sell after we got some great offers for the business. But, there's still a prospect. We'll sell that business one day.
Yeah, I think that, when I think of your name, business development is a second thing that I hear after your name, but also, all the relationships that you've developed. I mean, you've been very effective at building these relationships. I always hear nothing but positive things about you, and I think that's a testament to how you've branded yourself and the firm. How did you do that?
Thank you for that. Well, I think, fundamentally it comes back from the way I was brought up. Very fortunate to have some great parents that just taught us, it's better to give than to receive. And I've tried to build my business the same way, connecting people, helping them where we can. These are things that aren't often synonymous with investment banking, where on Wall Street they tend to put fees ahead of clients. I took the opposite approach and just said, we're going to help people. And in doing so, good things are going to happen for our firm. In terms of the networking aspect, It is true that I'm a tremendous networker.
That's an understatement.
In our business, people think of us negotiating all day long, spending hours analyzing businesses, and we do. We have a team for that. I spend about 50%, maybe even 60% of my time developing relationships.
Yeah.
And of all those efforts, our firm is a little bit different. We are not trying to work with as many clients as possible. We purposefully have built the business to only work on 5 to 7 transactions a year. But in doing so, to find the high quality company that is willing and interested in working with a firm like ours, we probably meet with 100 different companies in the year.
Yeah. How did you decide that this was the direction, buying and selling companies, helping them get their businesses ready to sell? How did you decide after you decided, hey, the track you were on as a CPA, that wasn't exactly what you wanted to do? How did you decide to start the company?
Well, picking back up at the story, I remember being a young audit manager at Bennett Thrasher, and I was just starting to get an opportunity to develop business. I remember the founding partners, starting to take me out on sales calls. And when we had our sit down, I started to ask, well, what is it going to take, to get on a partner track, to be able to do this more often than occasionally? And we talked about the time frame, and I reflect back on it being a young business professional and impatient. I would reflect or contrast that to today. I'm not young anymore, but I'm still impatient. And at the same time that those discussions were going on, I had a recruiter approach me to recruit me for a position with a public company and to join their M&A team. Being young and single and wanting an opportunity to, again, be people-facing, the job was going to require a lot of travel. It was going to require relationship building with potential companies that we wanted to acquire. So I decided to make a career change and plunge into corporate America in the corporate development role with Hanger Orthopedic Group. And when I look back, it was a pivotal moment in my business career. But I can say that almost immediately I realized that I was passionate about the pursuit of doing transactions. I was very fortunate to have an incredible boss who was head of the M&A program at Hanger, took me under his wing, taught me how to run a corporate development acquisition program, and gave me a lot of responsibility. Was able to travel around the country and acquire businesses, $100 million transaction sizes and below. Not necessarily on my own, mind you. I worked very closely with Mike, but that was really the foundation from switching out of public accounting and getting into the M&A business.
And how long were you there?
You know what? In a day and age where corporate careers are short, mine was even shorter. I was there a total of 3 years, and the first 2 years at Hanger were incredible. Drank through the fire hose. As they say in the M&A business, they're dog years, 80-hour weeks and, the pursuit of a transaction when it's there. We were on fire looking at probably 70 or 80 companies a year and buying 10 or 15 back then in those days. But a year and a half after I joined, Corey, we decided to get away from our accretive to earnings, buying smaller companies and integrating them into our company strategy. We decided to buy our largest competitor, and it was a transaction size of almost equal size as Hanger at the time. And so, the long story short, that transaction proved very challenging and financially damaging to Hanger at the time. We nearly lost the company. Fortunately, I can say that our department was not in charge of that. Hanger figured out a way to go to Wall Street and pay a Wall Street investment bank a lot of money to teach them how to overpay for an acquisition. So I emphasize this story today with a lot of the companies I meet with. I've been a part of hundreds of successful transactions, and I've seen transactions that aren't successful, and I've seen the consequences. So my last 6 months with Hanger before things got so bad, they had to reorganize the business and halt the M&A program, were spent closing non-performing NovaCare facilities that we had acquired in that acquisition. So 3 years corporate America, fell in love with the M&A business. That bug bit and hasn't turned loose. So I wanted to stay in the M&A business, looked for other corporate business development jobs here in Atlanta. And at the time, there weren't any M&A positions available. The recruiters were trying to get a Georgia boy to head up to the Northeast or to the West Coast, and I wasn't interested in leaving family that far behind. So the idea occurred to me that perhaps I could take what I'd learned in buying businesses and use that to help private business owners.
And when did you start Bravaldo Capital Advisors?
Well, the actual start date was 2010, but in reality, I started doing deals and advising private business owners as long ago as 2000.
I was going to say 20 years was going to be my estimate.
Sure.
But you certainly have a wealth of experience where you can guide and help folks and be a trusted resource. And certainly I believe that probably helps you in your credibility when you're schmoozing and meeting people out there who are thinking about selling their businesses.
Well, the experience of the past 20 years of advising private business owners, there's no substitute for that. The school of hard knocks. I can tell you we haven't seen it all. That's the beautiful thing about M&A. Every day is different. There's always a challenge and always a problem to tackle. But, you do get the benefit of that experience and a lot of the same issues do tend to repeat themselves with the smaller companies to mid-sized companies that we tend to serve.
Do you have a sweet spot, like an industry, or are there some a consistent set of criteria that you have your antenna up for when you're sort of going out and meeting these people and kind of doing your initial assessment?
Sure. Well, the financial criteria, we've built our firm to work with what we call lower middle market companies, and everybody has a different definition. But for us, Stone, that's businesses that could be as large as $300 million in annual revenues to as small as $10 million. Now, I know that's a crazy broad range, but it really depends on the industry group, right? So a good example of a great client for Bravaldo Capital at the very large end of that range, $200 or $300 million, could be, a very low margin distributor. Example, building products and fasteners. They operate on very thin margins. It could be food distribution, food brokerage, very, very low margins. And at that level, it's still a great business that we could work with. On the opposite end of the spectrum, a $10 million revenue company in the technology space that has recurring revenues, that's a very valuable company. They may not have any EBITDA or profitability, but that business is probably going to sell for a multiple of revenue, even a high multiple of revenue. So revenue ranges $300 million to $10 million. We're typically industry agnostics. We're one of the few remaining generalists out there and proud of it. The benefits of working across industries, you get to see a lot of different things. You meet a number of different buyers. And what people forget about in this day and age of specialization is that, the buying community changes its strategy all the time. I've watched corporate America, switch CEOs 3 times in 3 years, and each one of them has a different acquisition strategy in a different industry that they may decide to buy in. Private equity groups, they may be buying in 3 or 4 different industries in a calendar year. And so, being able to cross-pollinate, being able to think quickly on your feet, being able to look at each business and assess it independently of what your experience set may be, these are all the strengths that a generalist firm brings to the table. But that said, we have a great track record in several different industries, industrials being probably the core, where I founded the business when I was developing my business from the beginning and back in 2000. And we've added on business services, technology, and healthcare. It's probably easier for me to say what we don't do, and it's typically highly regulated industries. That's just something that a specialist firm would probably be better at than a generalist firm.
One of the things that you'd mentioned early on is networking, and my experience with you is that you're very unselfish and are not shy about giving, really maybe to your own detriment, not thinking about what you might get back. And everybody always says, at least in my experience, yeah, Don, I'll make this introduction. Yes, Don, I'll help you with this. And sometimes they're short on the actual follow through, and that has not been my experience with you. I think that the show is based on we're building, we're following up on relationships where we've had great relationships, either because somebody is a subject matter expert like yourself, or, they're just unselfish about making introductions, or they're okay and they think about different ways that they can add value to clients. And, clients, they may need stuff that you don't have any expertise in, but many times we've earned enough trust with them where they kind of expect you to go out and figure it out. And, I think that, MarketMate Atlanta, this show is about referring business. It's about subject matter expertise. And, I think that, at some point, the clients that I have are going to want to have a conversation. And the people that I've sent to you have always said, good things and positive things. And the other thing about that is, I know you follow up. I mean, I just can't be placed in a position to make a referral and then have the client go, hey, your guy never called me. And the fact that you have this subject matter expertise is great. The fact that you're unselfish with introductions is also great, but you follow through. So and in building this group, Stone and I wanted to, be able to make sure that we created people that had the right mindset, that are okay at thinking about giving as opposed to getting, and you certainly fit the bill on all those metrics.
Well, thank you for that, Corey. And I couldn't agree more with your philosophy. It is ours. Number one, in terms of a follow-up, everything that we do in our business, we do it with a sense of urgency, right? There's an old adage in M&A, and I'm sure it's true in other businesses, time kills deals, right? And so, a business owner that has made the decision to implement their exit strategy, wants to see, maximum effort to making that happen. And so I'm very fortunate to have built a team that shares that sense of urgency. We're incredibly communicative with our clients. We're available 24/7. And in this day of age where you expect 24/7, we actually follow through on 24/7. It's not uncommon for us to get the late night calls, either from the buying community that's hit an issue, or from our sellers that, are worrying, are they doing the right thing? Right. So, that communication is key in M&A to being successful and to helping our clients achieve their goals. As far as collaboration, it does take a village, to have a successful M&A transaction. We can't do it alone. Our piece is critical, but there are other critical pieces, right? That probably come at different times. In a perfect world, we talked about that company that's willing to plan, at least 3 years in advance and preferably, 4 or 5 years in advance. And at that stage, you can involve, your CPA, your attorney, your wealth manager, your insurance and risk management folks, and tell them, look, this is the plan. We're going to build the company over the next 5 years to eventually sell it. I want each of you as a resident expert in your fields of expertise. I want you to know each other. I want you to collaborate. I'm not, writing a blank check here, but if you guys want to do some planning together, once every 6 months, now's the time to really start thinking about these things. So we love working with others. Obviously, when we get into the market, i.e. marketing a business professionally for sale, it's an incredibly difficult time. And oftentimes many of our clients do come to us and say, I'm ready to execute. There's not 3 years of planning in advance. Make this happen. So if we're in that transaction environment, if we're in the market, if we're trying to close a deal, just how critical it is to introduce outside professionals that we know and trust and are going to get the job done, it's incredibly important. And so I can't emphasize that enough. The team that you're building, you have trust in them, and likewise, we do, and you as well. And that's what it takes to really put a deal on the line to bring in somebody else.
How do you two decide who you're going to let into this sacred circle of trust? I mean, because you got to be careful, right? Your reputation's on the line. Do you guys have some disciplines on that side of things, like things you're looking for in other people, and you're like, yep, that
I do. I can speak to.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not going to speak for Don, but I turned 55 at the end of May, and
you've been rode hard and put up wet, man. I'll tell you what. No, you look good.
Well, this is a radio show, so it's good that they don't have the actual video here.
This is why I do radio. But no, you have some rules or disciplines or something.
I think what I've learned is this: like, no trust. I have a really good client, and I asked him the same question. He said, "Like, no trust." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "If I don't like the person, it's hard for me to want to get to know them, and I get that." And he said, "If I don't know them, it's hard for me to make these introductions and do business with them." And so that the like, no trust is, I realized that in my advanced age, I need to listen to those things. If my first gut instinct is that I really think someone is really, good, then I need to follow it. And if it's the opposite, I need to also follow that as well. And, there's a lot of people here in our industry, in our businesses, and there's a lot of people that think just like us. And so I'm committed to finding those. And the other thing I look at is when I do make a referral, on some level, you're kind of like Chuck Woolery on the Love Connection. You've got to match up the personalities. I mean, at least this is the way I think of it. Like, no trust, but you got to match up personalities. You can't match a driver up with somebody that's laid back. It may not work. And so ultimately that referral is going to come back to you, and your client may say, well, Don, your guy was kind of aggressive. And now maybe it has the opportunity to adversely affect the relationship that you have with that person. So for me, there's a lot of considerations. Like, no trust. You got to know what you're talking about. I don't want people to go in and sell my clients. I just help them, help educate them, help them get their questions answered. And maybe they do something, maybe they don't. But the whole basis of what Don and I do is education. I mean, most business owners, they don't know, hey, you should take some time and build a runway out there to shore up whatever needs to be shored up in your business and so on. And also, they have to follow through. I just simply cannot be placed in a position where somebody says, hey, Stone, your guy never called me. And now it's a follow-up item on my calendar that I got to go back, to the referral that I initially made. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question.
And, I think I can pick up on just a couple of pieces. Number one, let me reiterate, other professionals, who would we refer? Who would we bring into a deal? Stone, great question. I couldn't agree more with Corey that after answering a few critical questions, that personalities do matter. To be able to communicate effectively to the client, there's got to be that mutual trust and respect. And that likability factor, certainly helps on the communication front. I think the first starting point, for us is, assessing that their technical ability and having confidence that they're incredibly good at their field of expertise. How do we get insight into that? It's, many years of getting to know one another, having, the experience of maybe working on a transaction together or on opposite sides of it. Or in our professional community, you over time realize who's incredibly successful at what they do. Another key component that I look for, while I want to see that success, I do want to see that advisor can be a good listener. Right? There are a lot of advisors that are good talkers, but I want to see some good listeners, because it does take a lot of patience and listening to get through critical issues on transactions. And then finally, we try and match values. We're not going to, when we have a choice, if we don't see that the values aligning from an integrity standpoint or the how we do business standpoint. And those are things that you develop, an appreciation for, and knowledge of over time as you get to know people.
The other thing that's important is, it's kind of cool to help out somebody that you built a relationship with. I mean, I think that, I'm not going to speak for you, but I know that, most of the business that I get on my own because, of things that I've developed, blogging, speaking and so on.
And your premier radio show, Tuesdays with Corey, the second Tuesday of every month. Right?
Yes, and MarketMate Atlanta. But, I think that it's really cool when you get a referral from someone, especially, someone like you, because you know that you've answered some questions. They have more than a passing interest. It's not a name in a phone book. And it's, somebody that is going to understand why I'm calling them or emailing them when I do that. So I think that, setting it up is very good as well. And, when somebody needs a referral, I will set up a virtual introduction. And, I'll set up the email. I'll give the contact information. I'll let them know, hey, here's what Don does. He buys and sells companies. He provides advice prior to the sale. He helps you make the sale and he helps you maximize your time that you've put in the business. And, I think that if I take the time to do that helps. And then, most times I will call both folks. But the whole reason that it was generated in the first place is somebody said, do you know anybody that can help me sell my company? And, well, yeah, let me call them and, let me kind of give them a heads up and I'll introduce you guys and you take it from there. Then I'm out of the middle of it.
Well, you take it to the nth degree though, because it's one thing to do that within your own ecosystem, right? But I could ask you if you know a good roofer. And if you don't, you'll go on the hunt for me. I mean, you're that guy, which is marvelous. I love that.
Well, we just try to be a resource to people. And even if it doesn't, affect you directly right now, it may at some point. And, one of the stories that I have is I had a client that came to me a number of years ago that, was less than satisfied with their payroll processing company. And, I was kind of listening, to him and he was, going on. And then he said, I need you to find a solution for me. And I kind of laughed and I said, well, I'm not really, he said, well, think about how many people you know. Surely you must know somebody. And, so, the payroll company that he had, was, put the payroll services in and then of course had other things that they wanted to sell and they just, drove him insane, kept, going back to him with these other things. And so I did find a company that only does payroll and I, heavily vetted the person and I realized that's probably not the last time that's going to happen. Because my wife and I don't have any kids. We go out to eat a lot. And our biggest discussions are, what I'm going to cook on the big green egg or what bottle of wine we're going to open or where we're going to go eat. And so, we get asked about all kinds of things. And I realized I needed to come up and find that solution, even if it had really nothing to do with what I do every day. So just being a resource, I think, is really important.
But it's for me, that's one more reason for me to have my antenna up and looking for opportunities to bring you into the fold. If I will look for and even search out because I'm beginning to learn more and more about who is a good prospective client for you. I'm actively searching that out. But part of the reason is because of the way that you've conducted yourself during the whole.
Well, I think the other thing, the people that get referrals from me, one of the things that they ask me is, okay, what's your experience with this guy? And, certainly when I refer you, I can say, well, I've known Stone now for going on 3 years. We've had a radio show that we do together. I have another show that he helps me with. It's generated X amount of business and so on. And so I can say, here's the things that you need to be prepared to talk about with him. And vice versa. I mean, you and Holly are clients of mine, which you shared at the outset of the broadcast today. And anybody that needs my expertise, you're going to be able to say, well, I'm a client of his and here's why I like it. And to me, that really, it really makes it more straightforward because if somebody wants to refer me to somebody that they don't have any experience with, it makes me feel some kind of way, like are you, what's the real reason you're sending me this way? So if I have a personal relationship with someone, if I've done business with them and the experience is good, then that I'm happy to help people because it helps my relationship with both parties. And people that have known me, they know that I throw compliments around like manhole covers. They know that I would tell them, not this guy.
Very true.
And so, but that's the way I was brought up. My dad was a no gray area kind of guy, and just lay her out there, let them know.
Well, it's certainly a testimony to the way you do business, because we do have mutual clients in common, and every one of them, talks about how you go out of your way to help, even in areas where it's not your field of expertise, but you've gone the extra mile to really do the diligence and help that business owner solve a problem. And really that's what it's all about in our business too. Trying to find ways to help business owners solve problems. One of the really cool things that I enjoy about our business is we get to see so many different types of businesses. And again, when we have the opportunity to build a community and form a long-term relationship, it's not just about, ultimately the M&A event. It's about, our goal for this year is growing X, and we may need some extra capital to be able to do that. Do you know anyone? Do you know a more aggressive lender that potentially would, actually pay attention to us and help us, through some of the challenges we have? It could be something as crazy as I remember a year or so ago, a business owner approached me and said, look, I found out that my wealth management firm has been overcharging me. I think there's that there's some,
I'm sure that cheered him up.
Yeah, it cheered him up. And he said, well, look, do you know, a lawyer that can help pursue in this particular circumstances? I'd never done this before, but was very fortunate that over the years of networking, to have met someone that, actually specialized in business litigation with broker dealers, which was what was called for. And so it was actually relatively easy to connect those people. Many of the things that we get to see, we see business owners doing some amazing things with their business, and those ideas are transferable, right? So we learn vicariously through them, and we're able to share with other business owners that are trying to tackle that same problem. So, we may not be, widget manufacturers, but we've been in, hundreds of widget manufacturing companies, and we know a good company when we see it, and we know some of the challenges that they face, and we know how others have solved those problems. So we're readily available and interested in offering advice and connections to help our clients grow their businesses.
Now, Don, how many employees does your firm have now?
Internally, we have a team of 7 investment banking professionals and support staff, which is a good size. We are trying to add an additional analyst as we speak, and I've had some amazing candidates, and so it's been a difficult choice trying to zero in on just who we want to grow our firm with. We also have an amazing advisory board comprised of retired CEOs and executives in transition. And they number another 7 advisors. And some of them are very involved in our business. They're very active. And this was an idea that I got years ago. Thankfully, I followed through on it, because I have a lot of ideas that sometimes don't get implemented. But this idea was...
Gee, I've never heard that before.
Every entrepreneur has that issue. But, we wanted to differentiate ourselves, and we knew that this planning thing was very important to our clients and our future clients. And many times we'll meet that business owner that says, hey, I have a goal of growing my business from 50 million in annual revenues to 100 million, right? That's what I want to do, and then I'll sell. Well, we'd get to that point and we'd say, well, look, we can do a business valuation, we can do a readiness assessment, but, along the way, we're not going to be capable of giving you operational advice how to get there. And I realized that, look, there's a great resource. There's many high quality retired CEOs in this community. There are many executives that are in transition that are willing to give time. Why not put an operating board together and get some operational expertise? And so surprisingly very few cases. It's not that we don't mention this service to everyone we meet. It's just many entrepreneurs get busy and don't spend the time to plan. But for a few, we're able to plug them in with some amazing CEOs that have been there and done it, and not only grown a business to $100 million, but have had P&L responsibility for $1 billion a year organization. You just got, people like George McConnell and Bob Thomas on our board that have done some amazing things and grown some businesses. And they're a great resource for lower middle market companies that are willing to engage and are interested in working.
How do you keep your employees engaged?
It's fairly easy. We're hungry. Every year the clock resets. Every calendar year, it's about how many successful transactions you can help your clients achieve. So all of us are very performance based. We're not an investment bank that's affiliated with, a very large commercial enterprise like a bank. Many M&A firms are a part of the big national banks, or they're part of, the Wall Street broker-dealer firms, and they have a big referral network. And so they're not as hungry. They can wait on transactions, and, if the deals don't work out in a calendar year, they're still going to do pretty well. Our firm, everybody there is motivated to really make things happen, to be responsive. And there is a component to our business where, sometimes things don't work out. And I try and look for a team that can take a long-term view, which is really hard to find. I mean, everybody wants immediate gratification. But I will tell you, in this business, over the long run, and if you can look at it, on a 2 to 3 year basis, it can be financially rewarding because you've made great things happen for your clients.
Well, I think that in your line of business, and correct me if I'm off in any way, shape, or form, you have to have the right relationships, and people, I think, want to watch you and hear about you and talk to others about you. And if they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of experience with you, then they're likely going to be more apt to say, "Hey, Don, it's time to sell my company," as opposed to somebody you just meet. That's why I think it's, one of the things you do, of all the things you do very well, one of the things you continue to do is go out and rub elbows and network and, do those business development kind of things.
It's so true. I mean, we were talking about, what do we look for in professionals that we're going to refer in to our clients, especially in a critical kind of M&A type situation or pre-deal planning type engagement. Those professionals are doing the same thing, right? They're assessing, the quality of the firm and how you do business. Yeah. I mean, it's a rare day that I meet a business professional and they say, "Look, I've got this longtime client that's thinking about selling their business." No, they want to get to know you. They want to assess your values and make sure they align just like we do with them. So yes, it's, time is your friend if you are careful and you stick to your principles and you do things the right way. Over time, people realize that, and in the long run, they like to do business with people that they know and trust.
It's an interesting point and an important point, I think. As a commission-based salesperson early in my career and as an entrepreneur and business owner later in my career, I've had some real peaks and valleys in income, and have like a really strong quarter, even a super strong year. And I know personally I have caught myself kind of coasting, after a really nice quarter or a really nice year, and maybe not, exercising what I call high velocity habits, just, doing the things, the basic blocking and tackling every day, every week, every month. People in my system sometimes fall in that trap, our other studio partners. You got to stay on top of that, right? And keep pushing that handle.
No, you absolutely do, Stone. And that, that's probably, the biggest challenge in our business. Is, we are not a recurring revenue business, right? It's typically, especially on the sell side, it's a one and done, right? One and done type event. Now, it's great when you find that technology entrepreneur that's going to, found and start and sell 3 businesses. But It doesn't typically happen every day. And so, we take the time as a team to celebrate our clients' victories, right? Because a lot goes into achieving those victories. I usually give it a few days for the dust to settle. And then, I am one of those drivers that Corey mentioned. And that's what it takes is setting, a high pace and a high bar. And with that, I do encourage my people, take all of your vacation because you're going to need it, right? Because when you're in here, you better bring your A game. And that's just really the way that we do business. But for a boutique firm that's not a large firm, but not a small firm and somewhere in between, there's absolutely peaks and valleys in a business that is very susceptible to, economic contractions and expansions. And so, it's my job as the president of the firm to, try and have that crystal ball to see where we're going. And, in bad times, our business grows on the buy side. Smart money buys when times are tough and valuations are down. And in times like this, we're heavily weighted towards sell side where valuations are through the roof. And when times are really tough, we help dig through distressed transactions and help owners work out of problems by helping them sell their businesses and get out from under personal guarantees. And we do that in partnership with turnaround firms and others. But, that's hopefully a different time that's a long way off in the future. But, at some point we'll be back there again. And that's just a few of the ways we try and deal with those ups and those peaks and valleys.
Don, what gives you the greatest satisfaction in your day-to-day activities with your company?
Without a doubt, it's really helping that entrepreneur that has spent their entire time as an owner-founder building a business, or if it's a family business that is maybe second or third generation. It's the family's generational pursuit. Building a very valuable asset. And helping them realize, the final touchdown, to their entrepreneur or ownership career and help them put an exclamation point on that. It's a great feeling to see them, successfully exit the business on their terms. Yes, valuation is a key to that. Everybody wants to hit that home run, and get wealthy or add to tremendous wealth that they've already generated out of the business. But it's also more than that. It's the satisfaction of helping them decide, determine, and then execute on selling to the right kind of buyer, to taking care of their people in that transaction. For some of those business owners that care about that legacy, devising a marketing plan that is going to sell the business to someone who's going to continue to run the business very much in the same fashion, and that name survive and the employees continue to have a home. So there's a lot of different levers that can get pulled in the transaction. No day is ever the same. It's a wonderful feeling though to really help that entrepreneur achieve success. And, I also reflect back, I don't want to divert too much, but, we're in a day and an age where, maybe capitalism is being questioned. I'm a staunch capitalist because I see just how difficult it is to grow a business. And I see the sacrifices that American entrepreneurs make every day. And, I want them to really, find that really home run at the end of the rainbow, because they're not appreciated, and in some ways maybe under threat going forward. So I feel like it's a mission and it's a passion.
Well, I think, you've worked extremely hard at building your reputation, your business. You've been diligent. You've been enormously disciplined. You've studied. You've got all this history. But another word that I would use for you is proactive. You're out there, you can't, I know you wouldn't do this, but you're not really in a position where you can coast. And, so you're out, I know you're out beating the bushes, every day to, continue, because I think, again, the two words that I think about after I hear your name is, business development. Well, business development expert, because you're out there schmoozing, rubbing elbows, and making an impact on people, because at some point they'll want to sell their company, or they'll want to talk to somebody about selling their company, or they'll know somebody that wants to do those two things.
Well, it's, again, very kind of you to say, because, I'm not ashamed to admit there's no formal sales training here. It's all been by accident and just doing what I thought came naturally. But, again, putting people first, has been, the key to our success. Surrounding ourselves with high quality people, whether they're professionals like you, Corey, that we know and trust. And if any of our clients have a long-term planning care need or question, it's an easy call to make to get you involved, to having an incredible team behind me at Bravaldo Capital Advisors that has allowed us to grow, and that care about our clients, and have really helped us develop the business to where we are today. I'm very thankful for that and blessed.
How has your business evolved since you started?
Wow, there's been a ton of change as it relates back to M&A. I would just say that 20 years ago, when I was buying businesses for Hanger, the due diligence process was short. I remember that we'd make an offer, and within probably a month to 2 months, we'd close a deal, or less. Due diligence period was probably about 2 weeks. It consisted of a site visit that might be 2 or 3 days. And I remember the late 90s due diligence being described as drive-by due diligence. Right. There were deals happening, and I'm not even sure people went to visit the companies. And that was just the day and age back then. And today, that period, is extended. We've got a deal right now where we've been in due diligence for 4 months, and it's appropriate. There's been a lot of challenges to get through, and we've got a good buyer that's hung in there, and we've got a great business that has met those challenges head on. They faced headwinds with the tariff situation, so we've worked through that. But the due diligence period is extended. The amount of data and information required has been a big change. The other key change I'll mention, knowing that we have a short amount of time, is private equity. That has been a game changer in our business over the last 10 or 15 years.
Good or otherwise?
Good. It's helped make a market for smaller market companies where they didn't have private equity as an option before. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the big reason is top down. A lot of money has gone into alternative assets because people are chasing yields, and these big institutional clients need higher returns to support retirement funds. That money's been allocated to private equity. And because of that, private equity has been forced to compete more and more for a very small number of high quality transactions out there. And they've chosen to do that by differentiating and by going down market. So when I started 20 years ago, private equity was, for $1 billion transactions. And, 10 years ago, it had come down to 500 million. 5 years ago, it had started to creep into lower middle market transactions, $100 million deal sizes below. And today, my time frame's off a little bit, but today, a business that, is as small as a $5 or $10 million business could become part of a private equity deal. Whether it's that private equity firm that owns something in the industry and is just trying to grow through acquisition, or, if it's a business it's probably, north of 10 million, could serve as a private equity platform. And that gives owners more of a chance to maximize value and to have different options than just selling to a competitor, which was what existed before.
Well, Don, you've had a great run, lots of success over the years. And if you could give the younger version of yourself some advice, what would it be?
Pay more attention. When you were starting your accounting career, you could have learned a little bit more, but that would be one thing. Number two, read a few sales and marketing books along the way and make things a little easier on yourself in terms of generating clients. I was very fortunate, and prior to starting Bravaldo Capital Advisors, to meet up with some folks at a predecessor firm that taught me direct sales. Right. And, I grounded out on the telephones, building up a a book of business that way. So I've done it both ways, believe it or not. And, I was just a much better networker and knew that would lead to larger, more sophisticated transactions. But, I would just say to myself, study up on sales and marketing. That's what it's all about when you're building a business.
If there was a young person that wanted to get into your line of work, what advice would you have for them?
Don't do it the way I did it. There's a lot of school of hard knocks, really building a boutique investment bank and not coming out of the industry with a bigger firm, which is the path that most people choose. If you're really interested in investment banking, it would probably be easier to get that experience on Wall Street, and don't learn the bad habits. But learn as much as you can, just like I did at Arthur Andersen, and then take that same knowledge and apply it to a smaller size client. That was basically our playbook. And that would be my advice to them. If it's somebody that is not on that industry track, as many of us, we start, in one career and figure out that something else is our calling. For me, that bridge to corporate America, where I got the experience from a very experienced boss that taught me how to acquire businesses. Corporate America on the biz dev side, is a great training ground for what we do as well. And then I would add, the financial background. It's very difficult to deal with the size businesses that we do and not have an incredibly solid financial background, whether you get that on the accounting side or on the banking side.
Don, you've had a great run. You've been a great guest here. If the listenership wanted to get a hold of you, how would they best do that? Do you have a website that they could maybe go to?
Absolutely. It's Bravaldo Capital Advisors with an S.com. That'll be the best way to get in touch with us. Look us up on the web. Our general number's out there, and we do answer the phones.
And what is your phone number if somebody wanted to call your organization? Our
general number is 404-857-2221.
And then is there a general email address that they might use?
It's info@bc-advisors with an S.com.
Don Bravaldo of Bravaldo Capital Advisors, you've been a great guest. Congratulations on all your success and continued success. Thank you very much.
Oh, Corey, thank you. Thank you, Stone. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely our pleasure, man. Thank you for sharing your story. All right, this is Stone Payton for Corey Rick. Our guest today, Don Bravaldo with Bravaldo Capital Advisors, and everyone here at the Business RadioX family. We'll see you next time on MarketMate Atlanta.